So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just give you a quick introduction to both Pat and to Gustavo. Really, neither of them need much of an introduction. Anybody in this field and who knows anything about Jungian or depth psychologies, archetypal psychologies, will know who they are. But I want to share just a little bit about them, and then I'm going to turn off my camera. I suppose Braulio and Camila will do the same, and we'll turn the floor over to them. So Patricia Berry, PhD, is a Zurich-trained Jungian analyst and one of the pioneers of archetypal psychology. So along with James Hillman, to whom she was married for 20 years, she really was so instrumental in developing this field. She's the author of Echo's Subtle Body, a contribution to archetypal psychology, so you can look for that online. And Patricia has been active in the Jungian world for, I grabbed this off an online site, Patricia. I don't think you've heard this or heard me say it, but it says literally you've been active in the Jungian world for nearly half a century. So I didn't even know you were that old, but that's a pretty amazing body of work. Yeah. So she has served on faculties and boards of training institutions and is the president of the Interregional Society of Jungian Analysts, as well as of the New England Society of Jungian Analysts. And in 1991, she was the first scholar in residence at Pacifica Graduate Institute in California. She teaches and lectures internationally, and you will find a tremendous amount of information about where Patricia's been. If you just start looking, if you Google her, it's quite remarkable. So welcome, so glad to have you with us, Pat. And let's go on. Gustavo Barcellos is a Jungian analyst in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and a member of the Association Jungiana of Brazil. And I'll let you say that in Portuguese later if you want to correct me on that. I'm a little afraid to attempt it. He's also a member of the International Association for Analytical Psychology, the IAAP, and is a founding member and was editor-in-chief of Cadernos Jungianos, which is AJB's annual journal. Since it started in 2005, actually. He's lived in the USA, especially during the 1980s, where he finished his MA in clinical psychology at the New School for Social Research, and he also studied at the C.G. Jung Foundation, both of which are in New York City. And it was during this period that he met James Hillman, with whom he studied and who was later to become his mentor and his friend. And after coming back to Brazil, Gustavo translated several of Hillman's books into Portuguese. And he is responsible for introducing archetypal psychology for Brazil, primarily. So he's the author of many books and articles, and both in Brazil and abroad, and in the field of archetypal psychology, imagination, and the arts, and including a book on the psychology of the sibling archetype. And I've heard Gustavo talk about this a couple of times now, and that's really fascinating work as well, so you might want to look into that. He also has a book, Psyche and Image, in which he published in 2012, and he's in private practice in Sao Paulo.
So this is with us now, Pat, north and south.
North and south. So
north and south.
let me begin and talk a little bit to give us a perspective about the switch from east to west to north to south for Hillman. And that was a big switch. That's what I wanted to say. North versus south. You know, for Jung, the axis of his imagination had much more to do with west to east for quite a number of reasons. But to make it short, since it feels as though we don't have as much time, he, you know, was invited by Wilhelm to give an introduction to the I Ching. That sort of sealed his relationship with the East. His notions of self connect with Eastern influences. His mandala symbolism. Hillman has nothing to do with mandala symbolism and didn't like the East very much. So it's a whole other world. For Jung, it's straddling a sort of his medical doctor science fantasies with his Eastern proclivities. You know, he grew up doing table stuff with conjuring spirits with his mother. He has a lot of that in his background. Okay, Hillman, as I said, went to the East, lived there for a while. It didn't click with him. He's an intellectual, as we all know. And something of a, I mean, I would say fantast in the best sense of the word, meaning he loves imagination. He loves imagination, and he's an intellectual, and that combination is very rare He wanted to be an academic. He was not an academic because that wasn't what his character was about. His character was about somehow using imagination with a intellectual depth behind it. He was drawn to Ireland for his postgraduate work, right? So it wasn't, I mean, even though it was the North, it was the fantastical North, you know? It was little people, little elves, and the literary imagination he was drawn to. So the sort of aesthetics of Ireland. He said England was a country of shopkeepers compared with Ireland. I mean, he was an Irish man. So he did write a thing about Kundalini, so he did do a little bit with the East, not much. Revisioning certainly is his big book. For me, that is the book that spells out everything. And it moves on an axis north to south. He uses the North to contrast the imagination of the South, of the Greeks, the Renaissance, sort of Mediterranean cultures. From that, he talks about polytheism, paganism, polytheism, multiplicity, basic to archetypal psychology. It's not a system. I mean, for Jung, with self and ego self-axis and that kind of stuff, system was very important for the mind of Jung. Not so for Hillman. He sort of bracketed out that part of Jung. Didn't pay much attention to it. Went rather for ambiguity, aesthetics, rhetoric. His genius works through rhetoric, if you really look carefully at what he's doing when he talks and when he awakens us with the most surprising things that he says. Not science, not system. He doesn't have that. Not like Jung. Myth. He's mythic. So he's always interested in it'd be a question, what is myth? I mean, for me, it's more than, but there's, lots has been written and talked about with what is myth. Soul. I mean, we get this popular use of soul. I don't know if you all know this, but this comes out of Hillman. I mean, he's the one who picked up the word soul, and it's a little bit in Jung, but not like it is for Hillman, and made it the center of his psychology. And now soul, the word is used, in the title of half the books on the self-help shelf. That all came out of Hillman, and it isn't always meaning soul the way he meant it, but that comes from him. So that's the difference between the minds of these two characters, Jung and Hillman, and it's why the shift from north to south for Hillman has a great deal to do with his psychology that came afterwards. Okay, that's my little preamble, Gustavo.
Yeah.
And you take us wherever you want to take us from there.
Yeah, it's a very nice preamble, Pat, and it already says lots of things, especially with this differentiation about Hillman being an intellectual, but not an academic, an intellectual and an imaginative man, and not an act. So his psychology, the psychology that we inherit from him, is an intellectual and an imaginative psychology, but not an academic psychology. So we move away from abstractions and conceptual reasonings and all that kind of stuff. So that's what interests us, I think, when we get close to archetypal psychology, right? So this is the man, this is his psychology as well, right?
That's right.
And okay, so to get to this point of, the east-west, north-south axis, this is the point of our conversation here, right? The first time I got in contact with Hillman, James Hillman, and archetypal psychology was through the reading of Revisioning Psychology back in 1984. So a tremendous happening to me. And of course, there was two main things that really attracted me there. The first point is this a polytheistic perspective. To be able to do a psychology that could, move to a polytheistic perspective. So it's a psychology that could, bring us diversity and a radical relativism, let's say. So this was really very important. I mean, to get out of the monocentric, always so present in psychology and very much present, in my opinion, in Jungian psychology. Mm-hmm. Well, the second point that really got my attention there was this moving south, right? So for him to get really polytheistic, he had to shift the axis from east, west to north and south, yeah. And then to meet to see that there was a psychology in the Mediterranean, right? He saw a whole psychology there, in myth and the ways of living, in literature and the imagery, imagination and all that. So he found a psychologist. He could have found a polytheistic psychology in the East as well, right? Hinduism and everything. But he kind of wanted to stay in the West, right? So with Hillman, we don't have to go east anymore to go deep. We can go south. So that really was something very important for me and I think for everyone who got in contact with the book and archetypal psychology. But being a Brazilian, Pat, living in Latin America, of course we have a sense of a South, as I call it, a Souther than South.
A South what?
Souther than South. Even Souther, So we can, my point has been, in all those years we've been studying archetypal psychology, I've been writing about that. How can, cultures beyond, south than the Mediterranean cultures, offer us still more psychology than what is already there. So we can, my point is that we can continue imagining the South metaphor beyond Mediterranean culture, beyond Greek myth, Renaissance culture, literature, and everything. You follow me?
Yes. Yes. I have a couple questions.
And this is very important because this touches another point. If you allow me to say something a little bit more about this polytheistic thing, because the moving south is a move towards polytheism, towards psychological polytheism. Everybody knows that. So this is a way, in my view, today. This is a way of us to get, it's a way out of what I call the myth of the center. We are always, engaged in a preoccupation with the center of things. What's the main point of something? What's the most important thing about this and that? So we get back to a monotheistic thinking, which is, difficult to differentiate things.
Yes. For me, what is important also, though, is the axis, that in a sort of aesthetic way, Hillman uses the North to highlight what he wants to highlight as South. So the tension is an important part of it. I guess that's what I'm saying. I mean, in a certain sense, North, think of Eskimo tribes and so on, they're also polytheistic.
Yes.
but he's really positing north of the Alps, sort of European north. So with rich polytheistic south, as in Greece or Rome. But it's the tension with what he's imagining as north that's also part of what allows him to make such a rich imagination of what's south.
Yes, and I think that what he is imagining as a north is abstract thinking, logical reasoning, no image, no imaginative.
That's right.
Right? Yeah.
And somehow Christianity too. I mean, the monotheism of Christianity. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which of course
yeah. I think the contrast of north and south is in a way the contrast between monotheism and polytheism.
Yeah, that's one part of it, for sure.
For sure, that's one part of it.
Yeah. And a really important part. Yeah.
Yeah, it is important because, polytheistic thinking allows us to differentiate more, to appreciate diversity, don't you think?
Very much so. And it also, it's like saying polytheistic, it means there's a God in each of the many points of view. So there's something more than just a simple point of view. There's something inspired in it. And that's animistic. That's very exciting.
And also, Pat, there is room for everything.
Room for, yes. There's a possibility,
Everything has a place, has an archetypal place.
Has an archetypal place and a God in it.
Image, even every pathology, right?
Yes. I think that's when you practice as an archetypal psychology, archetypal psychologist, you're also always looking for the spark that goes beyond the pathology, or what the pathology is trying to say, or the God in the pathology. Not that we just leave it there, but we see that. It's kind of what Jung called a finalistic point of view, although Jung didn't go far enough with it.
But Hillman does.
Into gods.
Yeah, but archetypal psychology goes even further than Jung went.
Yes.
But in this finalistic question, in really asking, what does this thing want from life? What does the soul want?
That's right.
Right.
And the soul is in this thing, whatever this God is in this particular perspective.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but what is most important for me here, Pat, is the appreciation of diversity. There is room for everything, even for the oddest of things. There is a reason for it. There is a place. There is a logic. It is logical, right?
In its own way. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we can do, after accepting this idea, for me, we can do psychology, we can do psychotherapy, because we can, appreciate how things are different. It's much more interesting to appreciate how different things are than trying to see how, equal they might be, what I mean.
One of the things that's important for me as a psychotherapist, though, is not to literalize or the particular myth or the particular character, the God that's there. It's not that the person is allowed to identify with it and say, oh, well, it's okay because I'm like Dionysus to get in all these things that I get into. They're drunk all day long. That's Dionysus. It may want something from me, but it's not an excuse, because then you make a monotheism of the polytheism.